And welcome to your view with me on Kopotse JJ Tawani. Sbu Ngalwa is our political editor here at Newsroom Africa. I don't know, should you still say new political editor?
Not by now. I think by now.
How old are you?
Just over a month.
Yeah, you are new, man. Yeah, welcome.
That's a long time.
Welcome, and thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. It's been an interesting week, eh? So what we do here on Thursdays, try to look at 2 or 3 big stories, and I thought let's start with the ANC's NEC. Obviously, you know, a big meeting. In fact, the president banking Davos to attend this meeting, Sbu.
Yeah. Look, I think it made sense, for one, on 2 fronts, why the president would miss Davos. For one, you'd remember that in the previous years, he would have gone there to make big promises about South Africa being open for business and that you can come in and invest. Now, if you have rolling blackouts, you don't have much to sell because there's no investor. I don't believe that there's any investor who wants to put their money in a country that cannot guarantee electricity. I mean, we're talking about Eskom. I think we've had about 22 days of load shedding last year. Now, you've got automotive companies that are, or other big companies that run on 24-hour production lines.
But wouldn't that be the reason to pull the plug on the whole thing? Because he still sent his ministers there. I was listening to Minister Pando, who was saying, oh, people are very happy. They just told them that, you know, the energy thing is being attended to, and etc. So if what you are saying is true, why did he still send a big delegation there of big wigs and ministers over to Davos?
Look, it's still important to show face. But I mean, you know that how serious this country has been about Davos and sending me people over to Davos. And I think the 2 reasons why. So the first one being that there's not much to say. 2, this was a crucial NEC meeting. It was a crucial NEC meeting that he could not miss. Because as you know, that going into this NEC meeting, there are issues around state-owned enterprises, but also there is the targeted campaign against Gordhan, which some people interpret to be targeting him, per se. So I think it was important for him to actually not to go anywhere, to remain here and actually fight within the ANC. And if you saw, I mean, it's quite unprecedented. It's not quite, I would say unprecedented for the president to actually, for them to open the closing address. I think that was also deliberate on the part of the ANC, where the president seemed, and if you looked at his body language, he looked confident. It looked like he had won the day. But it also, if you look at some of those decisions that were taken, I think he's sitting in a comfortable position so far as things are concerned.
Yeah, let's get into some of those decisions. Now, you're mentioning that the targeting of Gordhan is a targeting of the president. Does that mean that he will then stand his ground not to fire him because it will look like he's a weak president?
I think he will not fire Gordhan because it might actually be open to that. You know that the EFF has openly challenged him to say that if you don't fire Gordhan by the State of the Nation, we will disrupt your State of the Nation address. Actually, they are telling him not to fire Gordhan. Effectively. But also, I think more than anything, there's a bigger debate to be had as to whether firing Gordhan achieves anything.
Will help the situation. And that was what I asked NUMSA and BLF yesterday. That, and of course, NUMSA said they want him fired, but they couldn't tell me who's going to replace him. Because this thing is systemic. In other words, the policies that Gordhan is pushing on SOEs, on PPPs, if that's the route you're going to go, strategic partnerships, etc., are not his policies. They are ANC-backed policies.
Exactly.
So you must actually remove the ANC if you don't want those policies and not think that musical chairs are going to help. Am I on the right track there?
Look, I share the same view. I don't think that removing a minister changes anything, really. I think there's some deep-seated resentment of, if I may call it that, of Gordhan. But I also think that it's not, some people, it's also of his own doing, because there's this perception, I think there's this perception that Minister Gordhan is actually quite arrogant, but also I don't think that his handling of state-owned enterprises, and also the issue there, the CEOs, particularly of SAA, and also of Eskom. The former CEO, Gordhan, of SAA, and the former CEO of Eskom, Pagamani Hadebe. I don't think that was well received, particularly by black business, because it kind of played into the narrative and to the trope
of the purging of black executives.
Exactly, exactly. And also, if you looked at Jahana's resignation letter, actually it's quite clear that he spoke of interference by the shareholder, which refers to the minister. So, if then that is the case, it would explain why the NNC Lekgotla would actually even resolve on that. You heard President Cyril Ramaphosa talk about the fact that they will make sure that there's no political interference into SOEs.
Interesting decision there, because it means that there is an acknowledgement that indeed is at the center of some of the problems we're having regarding governance of these SOEs.
Very, very much so. So it was also probably to also placate and pacify those who feel that Pravin Gordhan has so much power, you know. But I think it was a win-win in a way at the end of the day. I mean, the resolution on the private equity or the ANC
strategic
accepting
partners,
that actually was quite something, you know. And you can tell, it tells you that President Cyril Ramaphosa, or at least his faction, if I may call them that, actually went there well prepared. And at the end of the day, I'd say they won the fight.
Yeah. So the unions are always raising a red flag, often as a red herring about privatization. Once they hear private, doesn't matter what you say after that. Right? If you say strategic private equity partner, say, that's privatization. Right? Are we going to win that debate, right, to make sure that there's strategic equity partner? Or do you believe that there's been a reluctance to even implement that? Pravin Gordhan announced 3 years ago as finance minister that SAA will get a strategic equity partner. 3 years down the line, nothing has happened.
Actually, you can take it back to 2012. Do you remember there was that commission, or I think it was a commission that was led by Ria Pierre.
Yes.
That looked
on the SOEs.
into, exactly.
Yeah, that report is gathering dust.
Exactly. That report also recommended that. But I think there's a realization in the ANC from all sides that the time of twiddling or fiddling their thumbs while Rome bans, it doesn't work for anyone. We are at a situation, we're at a point where we need to take serious decisions and concrete decisions about the future of this country. We have high unemployment rate, we have an economy that is not growing, and political squabbling over whether you should sell equity or not, it doesn't help us. But also, I'm one of the people who don't believe that government should be in the business of running business. Because as we've seen with our SOEs, that actually government has been very bad in that regard. And if you look at the issue of telecom, where government still holds a stake, telecom has been doing fairly well. Yes, we understand now that there are retrenchments coming.
Are pending. The unions are jumping exactly on that.
Exactly.
There we go again.
But if you look at telecom's performance compared to state-owned enterprises, I'd pick a telecom any day.
Yeah. It actually, a lot of people saying one of the few SOEs that actually pay dividends to government instead of going there begging for money.
Now, look at how many billions we have paid in bailouts. SAA alone, we've not paid less than, I think over the past few years, we've paid over 15 billion, just over a 2-3 year period. That's a lot of money.
If Telkom was able to pay dividends and then they are retrenching, do you think that may represent some bad planning or showmanship? So we're paying dividends, but then we come and say, oh, we're struggling, let's just fire people.
Look, it may well have to do with the tough trading
economic times.
Exactly, it may well have to do with that. But in terms of the overall performance of the entity, it is actually doing very well.
Yeah, and headed by Sbu Ngalwa, who people are quick to remind us that he was a taxi driver. I don't know where that comes from.
No, I think actually that's actually unfortunate.
Yeah.
Because it seeks to suggest that just because we want
a taxi driver, then you will always be one.
Exactly. You know, actually people should be looking at a Sbu Ngalwa and saying, look at this man.
Yeah.
It is possible for anyone to actually reach the highest echelon.
High excellence, and he has done well as a business leader in this country.
That's exactly.
But do you think was a scapegoat though on the Eskom matter?
Look, I think he resigned partially to also protect Minister Gordhan.
Oh, not the president.
Well, by extension, you can say the president, because there's a strong view that Gordhan is more like a scapegoat, or actually they want to hit Gordhan to get to the president.
Yeah.
So I think he had to go, because the reality is that it was quite embarrassing for the president. That whole episode was embarrassing for the president. But I think the narrative that is out there is that the president was
But if we had
misled.
a culture of taking responsibility, surely even Gordhan would have then used the same logic to resign.
Very, very much so. Actually, one of the things I couldn't understand to see is why, if the president accepts that the entire board misled him, why he would not call for the entire board to go. Why it's just 1 or 2 members of the board who are resigning? Because if there was accountability, then Jabu Mabuza was just the face of the board. And that entire board is the one that assured the president, and we had him standing in front of the country and promising everyone that we will not have load shedding. And lo and behold, come on the very...
Why do you think, in your analysis, there's always so much pressure on presidents and ministers to pronounce that there will be no more load shedding? I mean, this is just pure, straightforward, bad advice, because load shedding, the way I understand it, is actually an accident. It's not something you plan. So I'm going to have load shedding next week. That's why they always tell us the morning before, or the morning, or on the day, to say, by the way, our system is under pressure. We may expect load shedding. In other words, because of the poor maintenance of the setup there, right? It's almost, it has now become unpredictable when you're going to have load shedding. But this can't possibly have been known after this gaffe.
That is why it was quite bizarre, actually, for the president to actually give an exact time frame. And I think after that time, even us as a newsroom, that was the one question we couldn't get an answer to. I think in every morning conference we had, the question would be, how does he know?
That
what will they do?
Exactly. In the next month.
Exactly.
Maybe the assumption there was that because South Africa tends to shut down between the 15th of December and 15th January, somebody took a chance and say, we're going to have
this much capacity.
less demand, because factories are closed, people are at home, etc. And so they did some guesswork to say, we probably won't have load shedding because the system won't be under pressure.
Which is actually even more dangerous if we were to go on guesswork. But I mean, it is a fact that mining companies and big companies do shut down over that period, which means that there's less demand on Eskom.
So why have load shedding
So if you have load shedding during that period,
means I think deeper problem.
Exactly. It talks to deeper problems. It may have been embarrassing for the president, but I think for everyone it says, oh, hold on. It looks like we do have a far deeper problem. But also, I think there was a report by CSIR which looked into the current capacities that we have and the gaps that are there, which says that the reality is that over the next 2 or 3 years, we'll probably still be grappling with load shedding.
What's your analysis of why we're having this problem? You know, each time there's load shedding, people come out of the woodworks with all kinds of manuals of how not to do this, how to run Eskom, how to deal with load shedding, etc. And this week, of course, we had an Eskom board meeting, a mock Eskom board meeting, because I wanted to find out if we put these guys on the board, what would happen. So after the break, I want you to tell us what, in your view, if you're a member of the Eskom board, what should be done, number one. Number two, does the fact that you have all these experts outside suggest that we are failing, in a sense, to harness the human capital that is there in South Africa to resolve a problem as big and as overarching as Eskom? After the break, we continue that conversation. Thank you so much for being here on your debut. Is it your debut? You've been here before, but behind my back, no?
Not on this show.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Okay, good. Your debut then here on Your View. We welcome you. Let's take a break. Sbu Ngalwa is a new political editor here at Newsroom Africa. And he had a busy 4 weeks, including interviewing the president out in Kimberley. What did you make of some of the answers he had to give? I think you had to push him a little bit.
I think it was a bit cagey, and actually, I think he should have taken. Oh well, I'm being generous here. But I think he missed an opportunity where to assert himself. Yeah. I mean, there was a question where I pushed him at the end to say, "Would you win a conference?" It's a hypothetical question. If we go to conference tomorrow, would you win?
Yeah.
And still he could not give a response on that one. But also, more crucially, because there is a perception that the president is actually not in control. That is as politically weak, and that is allowing other people, particularly his deputy and also the SG, to take center stage when he should be asserting himself as a president, particularly in time of crisis. And his response was that he is a man of consensus.
Yeah.
You know, but I think this is a time that demands and
some leadership,
exactly,
some,
where a president has to take decisions. I think in times of crisis, people are actually even more forgiving when a decision, I would say autocratic, but I mean, where if we were to take a decision without consulting, if it is seen to be a pragmatic decision,
that's going to help us to solve the problems.
Yeah. So,
going back to the question I asked before the news, why do you think that we seem to have so many experts? And I'm not just talking about people who are not in their line of work. I mean, you and I can pontificate all night here, but if we were put in the Eskom war room, we won't know what to tell those people. But I'm talking about engineers, people who have worked at Eskom, etc., experts in the energy field, etc. Do you think that Eskom hasn't found a way to harness that kind of knowledge base?
Look, I think there's a huge pool of people with opinion. And I actually always say this about political parties. When you are in opposition, everyone will always have an opinion. But when you are in the hot seat, it's different. So it's easy to pontificate sitting on the sidelines to come up with all sorts of ideas of what could or what could not work. But I think when it comes to the issue of Eskom, obviously there's a bigger debate about where the continued use of coal, but also the issue around renewable energy, whether we should go that route, and also to what extent can you go. But I think everyone agrees, though, that we do need a diversified energy mix. I do not have the answers. I do not know, but I always listen. But I think what everyone agrees on is that we do need a diversified mix, but it's the how-to part. And I think it's becoming political hot potato because of the political interests that seem to be overshadowing the whole thing. Yeah.
Has anybody checked on the new CEO of Eskom?
Actually, he's actually come out of the woodwork. For a while, he was hiding in his shell. Yeah. But I see he's done some interviews lately. But I've yet to see him do a TV interview, though. I think he's still shy. Yeah.
The Raiders. Mr. De Raiders, you're welcome. Come and talk to us here at Newsroom Africa, especially after that mock board meeting. And it continues on Tuesday, and we'll give you some ideas. Now let's go to state capture. Interesting announcement there by the Deputy Chief Justice, so he needs more time.
Look, incidentally, actually, the state capture is exactly 2 years today that former President Zuma signed or proclaimed the Commission of Inquiry. And we thought by now the judge would be done. But the reality is that I do agree with him. Those terms of reference are too broad. Yeah. I mean, there's a part where they talk about they must investigate whether any current member of the executive, a former member, or any member of staff at an SOE would have influenced tenders one way or the other.
Massive.
That's
a commission on its own, just that element of the terms of reference.
And then you also understand that this came about also flowing from Tulu Madonsela's report on state capture. So there were some terms of reference that dealt with that. But now we're sitting with the state capture commission that is spent no less than 350 million. That's a lot of money. And I think when it started, people were excited. We're now at a point where we're all fatigued. It's like, oh, what now? Yeah. What are we getting now? Who is appearing before the commission? But I think
maybe they must ask the CR17 donors to just donate to the commission.
I don't think there's any money left in those coffers.
But don't you think that for a commission of that kind of broad terms of reference, that they should have planned it in such a way that by now they could have an interim report of some kind. And by the time these guys give us a report, which at this point it looks like it to be next year, right? Half of the people who are supposed to, you know, to face the music would be either dead, they would have left, or they would have chowed that money, man.
And actually, we may not even get them prosecuted after all. I think that actually makes more sense, because the judge is asking for the president to reduce the terms of reference. I don't think that's the route. It can be done, but I think actually to compartmentalize the issues. For instance, to say, let's look at the issue of Bosasa and state capture. Because already most of that...
And have a finding on that.
On that one. So
and you have get the prosecution to continue while he wraps up the other.
You have interim reports that come out while the commission continues. So that
but
way,
did anybody ask him there? I didn't catch the whole press conference.
I do not recall picking up on that particular question. But I think that would go a long way in terms of assuring South Africans that something is happening. Because all that we're seeing now is a commission that has been sitting for a long time. And some of the, if you listen to some of the evidence, you actually not quite, if you miss it for a week, you might actually be lost. Because the stories are moving from the Guptas to other state-owned enterprises and the different players. There's Bosasa on the one end. I mean, today there was a former Eskom board chairperson,
Zola Tsotsi.
Talking about ministerial interference. So I agree with that sentiment that says that perhaps the best route to go, because I mean, I think issues of Bosasa now, insofar as that is concerned, the judge can make a recommendation to say go one way or the other.
Sis Nomvula and the related other ministers, Sis Dume, they must still go and tell us about all the Louis Vuitton bags and the piece of chicken.
Now
that hasn't happened there.
Now, had the judge compartmentalized, or if he were to be allowed to do that, he would actually deal with one issue, wrap it up, call all, because you still have all these witnesses that are outstanding that are still to give evidence. So let them come to the commission, let the president either truncate those terms of reference or find a different model which will keep this thing flowing so that law enforcement agencies can get going.
What's your analysis of Watson's death?
Look, I do not
apparent death.
I do not believe in conspiracies, but I mean, it just does look, it did look a bit curious. I mean, there are all these questions around what he was driving and the speed he was traveling at and all of that. I mean, there are two theories that I have. I think, actually, there's one theory. I think it was a suicide on his part. That's what I believe. I know
suicide or faked death. Because when you say suicide, anything can happen with the cable vibe comes there. Assisted suicide.
I think the guy's dead.
You think he's dead?
I think the guy is dead. I mean, it probably got to a point where he couldn't bear it. And the reality is that, I mean, he's built this company. It's a huge company in terms of assets and the money it has made. And just like the tide is turning, they are now the state of state capture. So it was a lot. You know, I think he found it.
Do you think the media has stopped chasing that ghost?
Look, the ghost of Watson, I think everyone has accepted or has resigned themselves to the fact that the man is dead. But I think insofar as the extent of the rot at Bosasa, we still have to hear more evidence. If those witnesses you are referring to Dumieni and your Nomvula about the issues of the groceries and all the money and all the food parcels that were donated, that they'll still come and account. So I don't think we've heard the last of Bosasa, but obviously the main figure, the overarching figure in all of this was Gavin Watson. Yeah.
What's happening next week that we should look forward to?
Next week, I'm trying to think off the top of my head.
Is the state capture continuing? Is it Zola, so is it finished? What he had to say about Eskom? Because we always get a new story with Eskom, eh?
No, I think Eskom will remain the story. But I think I just need to check in terms of the State Capture Commission. I'm not quite sure when they are, but I do know. I don't think that they are continuing tomorrow.
Yeah, but when you listen to the stories about a new age, and you may think we're in the wrong business, man. You know, people just buy breakfast for 45 million rands. Just breakfast.
I mean, the judge talked about the extent of corruption that we had, and it was clear that the Guptas made money through those breakfasts. But also you see the link that Zola Tsotsi was making around the appointment of Colin Machila, who was then a board member. And as soon as he comes in, then suddenly there are these these partnerships with the new age, and that on its own talks to how deep the Gupta tentacles went. I mean, they appointed boards, they had people everywhere, you know, in all the facets and in all levels of businesses. But it's important to note that issues of state capture and the behavior by business is not new to the Guptas. I think there are other areas of state capture that are happening at a smaller scale in municipalities that are not under the spotlight as we're seeing currently.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a free state, you know, with a dairy, could have ignored it and say, oh, it's in a little province somewhere in the middle of the country. And then you have one of the biggest scandals linked to the Guptas there with this dairy farm and what have you. The last thing, Sbu, is the issue of the role of President Zuma. President Zuma, I don't know who described him as a kingpin, in a sense, of state capture. You may not like it, but you know, we are not here to please him, right? He is the key suspect of state capture. And yet, it seems to me that it's becoming bleak and bleak whether Zondo will get to question him.
Look, the reality is that he was the key enabler. Because in everything that the Guptas did, his name was the common denominator, whether they were lending a plane, whether you can use a code name as number one, or whether they were looking for business, Temba Maseko gave his evidence, or whether in every other, in threatening, and also not threatening, but just strong-arming government officials and ministers, they always used his name. So it is quite actually important that for the former President Zuma to return to the commission, because this is the one man who throughout the years, from the first time when he was charged with Shabir Sheikh, who had told us that he wants his day in court. This may not be a court, but it looks like he's doing everything in his power
to run away from accountability. Right. And one wonders whether he will be remembering anything when the day comes.
I think that there's another issue there. I mean, the man says he's sick. I do believe that he may be sick, but I think his amnesia is selective.
Yeah, well, it looks like that issue may deepen in that he may end up not testifying if he doesn't remember much because of the illness.
And you cannot go against that. I mean, his doctors have invited the judge to look into his supposed sickness, as to what it is and also if he can continue. But I think from what the judge was saying, he was also not sure whether the former President Zuma will be able to testify or not. But I do think, though, that there is enough. It's actually quite sad in that this would have been an opportunity for him to either deny or confirm those allegations. But if you look, if his past performance is anything to go by, it is clear that with his memory loss or supposed or sudden memory loss, that you will not get much from him anyway. So even if you were to return to the stand, I don't think we'd get much from him.
We're not going to get
much. But I don't think it stops us from all the evidence that is out there from pursuing those.
Sbu Ngalwa, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you'll be a regular. Come and just help us understand, and we can also get a sense of how the newsroom at Newsroom Africa is ticking.
Thank you very much.
Your leadership. All the best with the new job.
Oh, good.
We look forward to working together.
Thanks, man.
Right, Sbu Ngalwa there, our political editor, helping us to look at the week that was. Let's take a break now.